Welcome to the Tyler Werner Show, discussing all the latest in Philadelphia sports.
I just felt comfortable, confident and comfortable.
The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out!
Man, I love y'all. I hope y'all keep trusting the process.
And now, here's Tyler Werner.
Welcome all to the Tyler Werner Show. Yes, this is a very interesting week, to say the least, in terms of Philadelphia Eagles football. Is now not only have the Philadelphia Eagles lost a heartbreaker in overtime, that I said they needed to win, that I was confident that they were going to go down to Dallas and win. It didn't happen. And now big news out of this week, of course, is Carson Wentz, now questionable for Sunday's game against the Los Angeles Rams. And this is the game many people have been saying, as we've been looking down the stretch here of the schedule for the Philadelphia Eagles that is to remain. We're looking at this game, this Rams game. It's like, well, you know what? This is a game where, Carson Wentz is going to be motivated. This is the game last year over in Los Angeles where Carson Wentz got hurt, out for the season. I don't know how big of a factor that might be into his play if he was going to play the game, if he still is going to play the game. But now, not only have the Philadelphia Eagles set themselves back a little bit with this loss against Dallas, so there's no chance winning the division at this point. Things remain an uphill battle for the Philadelphia Eagles to even get the wild card spot, to get the 6th seed wild card spot. Although the Minnesota Vikings gave the Eagles a little bit of help losing in Seattle on Monday Night Football this past week. So if there's anything to kind of hang your hat on, it's that. And we don't know if Carson Wentz is going to play. He's questionable. And this is the thing, too. We'll get into this. We'll listen to Doug Peterson's more recent press conference during the week. It's almost like week one all over again, where Doug Peterson, it remained questionable as to whether Carson Wentz would be ready to start week one against Atlanta. And as you remember, Doug Peterson got kind of fumed a little bit with reporters leading into that week one matchup, where it's kind of like, well, evidently Nick Foles is going to be the starter, where there were reports coming out. It's like Carson Wentz is not going to start week one, and Doug Peterson got fumed over that. So I don't know if this is another situation like that where, all right, Carson Wentz, there's no surgery needed at this time for the fractured vertebrae. And the question is there risk to re-injury or further aggravation of this fractured vertebrae if Wentz does suit up? Meanwhile, you got Ian Rappaport, who believes Carson Wentz is going to be shut down for the season. And right away, reports like that, theories like that, much to the chagrin of Doug Peterson, who says Carson Wentz is questionable for Sunday.
Come on, that's terrible!
So, it remains to be seen. And it's one of those things. If Wentz is shut down, hypothetically, here we go. Nick Foles. It's like, can he pull off this miracle 3-0 finish to the season? Can the Eagles sneak into the playoffs as that final wild card team? And maybe make a run?
No.
I don't know, but that's what's on the table right now. The Minnesota Vikings. All right, just to put this in, and see, it makes it tougher now now that the Rams are coming off of a loss, now that the Texans, who the Eagles will play the following week, now that the Texans are coming off, well, they just lost this past week, but now that they got a loss out of their system, it makes these games tougher. You figure the Rams now coming off a loss. Had they be coming off a win, maybe I give the Eagles more of a chance. Minnesota Vikings down the stretch here. They're hosting the Miami Dolphins. That could be a loss. Dolphins, although, they're coming off of a miracle win. This is on the road in Minnesota. But the Vikings, they've been suspect as of late. All right, so, okay, it could possibly be a loss. At the Lions the following week, division game. Lions maybe playing a spoiler role. That could be a loss. The Bears visiting the Vikings the final week. That could be a loss. I'm not saying they're going to lose all three. But if the Vikings lose 2 of these games, that would put them at 7-8-1. Where if the Eagles can maybe finish 8-8, if they can, all right, they win the last game of the season against the Redskins with or without Carson Wentz. Can they pull off one of these upsets against either the Rams or the Texans? Maybe the Texans. Possibly. Just because this loss with the Rams is a little more fresh in their minds. And the Texans this week, they have a week to maybe get another win here, and the Rams are just the Rams. They're a great team. They credit to Chicago Bears what they were able to do. But still, the Rams have only lost 2 games all year for a reason, and I can't feel this Eagles defense against this Los Angeles Rams offense. That typically, week in, week out, is one of the best in the league. And I gotta say too, this Eagles defense that was on the field for 90 snaps, was it? That's the other thing. And I'm not, right out of the gate, I know there was the fumble controversy, which, I don't understand how officiating. First of all, the officials make the call that the ball wasn't out until, I don't know, they originally said it wasn't a fumble. So not only did they drop the ball at first, but then when they review the play, apparently the call that comes in from New York, apparently those guys got it wrong too. But anyhow, unfortunately, the rest of the entire first half, again, the Eagles' offense struggled. And it's been a thing all year. They've been the worst in the league at scoring in the first half, which to me is a problem. When this is a defending Super Bowl champion team. And if Frank Reich, DiFilippo, if those guys not being here are the reason, and Doug Peterson can't dig out of that hole, then that's too bad. You mean to tell me because those guys aren't here, that makes Doug Peterson that much worse of a coach? Offensively? Come on. Now, you got you got Carson Wentz. I don't know. There's many things you can look at with this season, no matter how it shakes out down the stretch here, that maybe you can point at and say, oh, well, this is what happens a lot to Super Bowl champion teams. The next year, they just don't come out with the same fervor. Or the injury bug really catches up with them. Because last year, they had somewhat of an injury bug too, but they were able to overcome it. This year, it's maybe even worse. And they got a suspect offensive line. Carson Wentz doesn't quite look as spry, and maybe that lends itself to the tightness in the back that he's had. I mean, he was in late October, he was listed as a couple of times as a limited participant in practice. But now this week it was more of an issue, which prompted the tests, and lo and behold, they kind of found the problem. Now, whether it's going to keep him out Sunday again remains to be seen. Let's see. Doug Peterson said he has a stress injury, evolved over time, and requires no surgery. I'm not asking or answering any more questions about it. We're playing the Rams in 2 days if you guys haven't figured this out. He's listed as questionable, and that's the way it is. Doug Peterson, not...
Trust the process.
Trust the process. He's Wentz is going to be questionable, I guess. And they told Foles earlier in the week, be ready to play. Just in case. So who knows? We might see number 9 this week.
How's everyone doing? Let's make some noise. Come on.
Ian Rappaport, again, he said, hard to imagine he plays another regular season game in 2018. Peterson said, if we put him out there has to be a 100% chance that there's no risk of anything further. Well, with that being said, I don't know. I mean, takes a couple of hits. Wouldn't that maybe make his back feel worse with the fractured vertebrae situation, even if it's something that doesn't require surgery? Peterson told reporters that the full recovery for Wentz's back injury could take up to 3 months, so it makes little sense to expose him to unnecessary hits if they can be avoided by sitting the franchise quarterback. Peterson said, I think you guys can sit here and say it's probably a red flag. A lot of injuries occur because of the nature of the sport, the violent hits of the sport. Guys know exactly what they are getting into, even at a young age, and I think Carson is no different. But moving forward, we need to make sure we do a better job of protecting him, starting with the offensive line, starting with the backs. He does his part getting the ball out of his hand. I do my part by maybe incorporating more screens and quick throws to help that, but it's not in any way going to change the aggressiveness of my nature or his moving forward. Now, Peterson says he does his part by getting the ball out of his hand. That wasn't so much the case in this Cowboys game for those who watched it. There were times where I'm like, you got to get the ball out of your hands. You got to get rid of it. And it didn't happen. I mean, there was the one play where he almost got rid of it out of his hands, but it ended up being a fumble. Although Carson Wentz had I think he had, 120 quarterback rating. I mean, still, if you watch that game and some throws, easy throws that were off target, it's just, I don't know if it's still a little bit of the again, just the lack of spryness. I mean, at times he looks slower getting out of the pocket. And when he does, he's great at making throws on the move. I almost think Doug should almost deliberately, design play calls that, or use more plays where he's rolling out of the pocket, throwing on the move. I almost think a lot of times he's better throwing outside of the pocket on the move than standing in the pocket and oftentimes holding on to the football in the case of this Dallas Cowboys game. I don't know. The Eagles, again, in that first, and this is what set the tone for the game, and that's why I refuse. All right, the Eagles, if they had the ball there at the 20-yard line, if it did go there, well, then what? I mean, you look at what the Eagles did the rest of the first half. Not a guaranteed touchdown there by any stretch. And I know the kicker missed an extra point, which is a doggone shame when that happens, especially in a game that ends up 23-23, going to overtime, where maybe it could have been 24-23. And the bottom line is the Cowboys, they were controlling this game. The Eagles came up with some fortunate turnovers, but the Eagles were unable to capitalize on those turnovers. I mean, they picked off Prescott a couple of times. Fumble recovery here. But they gave up so many yards, and the Cowboys were able to control the game so many plays, eating up time with Ezekiel Elliott, just what they were able to do in general. That unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles when on offense you're going 3 and out far too often. So at the end of the day, I mean, the Eagles, they didn't do enough. When they did get the ball first on offense, and they didn't do anything with it. And then after that, they didn't really do anything with it again. And you got Carson Wentz. You got your franchise quarterback, who maybe doesn't quite. I mean, his stats are good, but in key situations, it seems plays aren't made. You got Zach Ertz, maybe the best tight end. He's probably going to break Jason Witten's receptions in a season. And you got Golden Tate, Alshon Jeffrey, some decent receivers in their own right. And the running game, I know Josh Adams, again, only gets a small handful of carries because they fall behind early. And unfortunately, it becomes a little inconvenient to run the football. I still think maybe they should have tried to run the football a little more with Josh Adams, considering they weren't behind by a whole lot. And since they really couldn't score anyways with what they were doing early in the game. And then they try to bring out Smallwood and just kind of out of the blue, and whether I didn't understand that either, but we know Corey Clement on injured reserve for the season, so that's another loss in the running back department this year. So I don't know. There's too much. I'm not saying the Eagles, are the Rams or the Saints with those dynamic playmakers that they have on offense, or the Chiefs, even without Kareem Hunt now. But they still have. They still have enough talent on offense that they shouldn't be struggling so much in the first half. That's just the bottom line. And your defensive secondary, already depleted due to injury, they got to be out there so much more in a game like this against the Cowboys. It just it doesn't make matters any better. So we look at this, what the Eagles are, whether Wentz is going to be out there or not. And you're telling me they have to beat the Rams in Los Angeles this Sunday night. And then the following week, they got to defeat the Houston Texans. And then after that, they should be fine against the Redskins, who, well, I guess it was fun while it lasted. Had Mark Sanchez in there at quarterback. But the Eagles, they got a miracle to pull off. Now, if they, again, if the Vikings drop 2 of the next 3, and they finish 7-8-1, and the Eagles finish 8-8, it could be done that the Eagles end up with that 6th wild card spot, and they would probably have to go on the road and take on the Chicago Bears, which certainly isn't promising. But I mean, if anything, all right, they got back to the playoffs, even though it wouldn't be pretty and yada yada. However, there is a small caveat in here that I'll throw in. Now, look, the Panthers, they're done, and the Redskins, they're done as well, even though they're still mathematically alive. Say they're done. The Green Bay Packers, depending, and this is coming out of the blue a little bit, they're 5-7-1. However, now they're just kind of playing, even though I didn't agree with the Mike McCarthy firing that soon. They're on the road against the Chicago Bears this week. Now they're kind of just playing. They're playing, I guess with that burden off their shoulders. If that's how they want to look at it. They got the Bears this week. Division game. You never know what Aaron Rodgers could do. What if they win that? And then the following couple weeks, on the road against the Jets, which they should win. And then the following week, they host the Detroit Lions, which they should probably win, especially if it could mean getting into the playoffs. Packers win out. They finish 8-7-1. And the Vikings, if they finish, well, they could finish 8-7-1. Might come down to a tiebreaker between the Packers and the Vikings then, which I believe both teams tied. And then, if I'm not mistaken, the Packers may have previously lost to the Vikings at some point. Let me check here to confirm that. Yeah, they tied September 16th, and then they lost to the Vikings 11-25. So yeah, the Vikings would get the tiebreaker in that situation. But what I'm saying is, not only could the Vikings finish 8-7-1, the Packers could also do that if the Vikings don't finish 8. If the Vikings finish 7-8-1, depending what the Packers do this week. I mean, again, you never know. Bears coming off a big win against the Rams. Packers out there playing with their heads on fire or whatever. Their hair on fire from, use like a hockey cliche. That's like a Steve Coates cliche or something like that. I don't know. You never know with the Packers. They could very well finish 8-7-1 and somehow sneak in if the Eagles finish 8-8. That could all go away, though, if the Packers lose to the Bears this week. But you get what I'm saying. So, are the Eagles mathematically eliminated? No. But that loss, I mean, what can you say? They lost both games of the Dallas Cowboys this year. That's disappointing. And I know, like, Cowboy fans want to rub it in our face. Like, oh, that's all well and dandy. I mean, have fun in the playoffs, probably losing to the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they beat the Seahawks down in Dallas. And then again, you never know. But then you'd have to take on the Rams or the Saints the following week. So, all right, even if maybe we'll spot you a playoff win, but still have fun. Dak Prescott, Jason Garrett, their extensions, have fun. Continuing to not really go deep in the playoffs at all. That's what I say. I'd be shocked if they go very far in the playoffs. Let's put it that way. So you Weasel Cowboy fans in this area who haven't sniffed a Super Bowl in many, many years, all right, knock your socks off. You want to rub it in. That makes you feel better. It's pretty sad, but, whatever. When the Eagles beat the Cowboys and stuff, when they I don't feel a need to go rub it in their faces. Like, maybe some Eagle fans do, but I don't feel a need to go on social media and rub it in people's faces. Why do that? I mean, we could talk about it. Talk about it in a podcast. Break down the game. Anyhow, hit a first break here on the Tyler Werner Show in this edition. We have to get into this Doug Peterson press conference. Sixers disappointing loss against the Brooklyn Nets. However, fortunately, no major damage to the groin for Jimmy Butler. I know that was a concern after the MRI results revealed earlier this week. Things are all right with the groin. However, he did miss that Brooklyn Nets game. Sixers got the Pacers coming up, so we'll see if hopefully they can bounce back on their Pacers rolling. They're right behind the Sixers in the standings. So hopefully they can, hopefully the Sixers can bounce back at home when they take on the Pacers. But it's going to be a tough one. Should be a good game. Hopefully Jimmy Butler suits up. All right, so we'll take a break. Come back with more right here on the Tyler Werner Show. Stay tuned for more after this.
It's no big news flash that many people, you included, eat as a way to medicate themselves. You can choose to worry about it or not. You can choose to panic about your situation or not. It's clear what you must do in order to make important changes.
5 letters here. RELAX. Relax. We're going to be okay.
In order for you ever to effectively figure out and map how to get to where you want to go, you have to first know exactly where you are starting.
RELAX. Relax.
You have to be willing to change what you're doing. You can change your behavior.
Investigators are calling it the heist of the century. The grand robbery of Brady and Belichick's slow-cooked Italian meatballs, committed by some apparently hungry NFL officials who love their balls.
I came in Monday morning. I was shocked to learn of the news reports about the balls and the process that happened between when they were prepared and went to the officials and went to the game.
As shocked as Belichick was of the news, perhaps Brady, the last man out of the kitchen on that Sunday night, was even more shocked to hear of the news of the theft.
I have a process that I go through. It was the same process that I always go through. When I felt them, they were perfect. I mean, I wouldn't want anyone touching those. I would zip those things up and lock them away, and that's what I thought I was doing.
As Brady and Belichick upped the ante on their ball security, you'll just have to pick up a pack of their meatballs the next time you hit the grocery store and enjoy just how perfect these balls really are.
Tom's personal preferences on his ball security are something that he can talk about in much better detail than I could possibly provide.
So we are back on this edition of the Tyler Werner Show, coming off of a very unfortunate, disappointing Eagles loss to the Dallas Cowboys, getting swept for the season down in Dallas. And Dallas at this point is pretty much running away with the division. Meanwhile, the Philadelphia Eagles, they still have some life in the wild card race, as I was just discussing. And like I said too, things are made more interesting now with this Carson Wentz injury situation with the back. I don't think he's going to play, but nevertheless, we have Doug Peterson who says he's questionable. So he's not ruling Carson Wentz out. I don't know. Let's hear from Doug Peterson himself. There was a press conference earlier today to discuss right here on the Tyler Werner Show. So here's Doug Peterson. Carson Wentz is questionable but requires no surgery. So here was Doug this morning.
Good morning.
Doug, can you confirm that Carson Wentz fractured vertebrae? Is it one? Is it
Here's what I can confirm, that he has a stress injury, that this thing has evolved over time, and it requires 0 surgery to heal.
Stress fracture.
A stress injury, yeah. You can word it how you want. Well, fracture, injury.
Okay. And when did he first start complaining about it, and when did the team first become aware that he had a back
It's just
issue?
evolved over time.
You
I'm
don't
not
recall when
going
it
to get
happened
into a
first?
ton of specifics on this. You know that right now. So
Is he playing Sunday?
he's questionable. Listed as questionable.
Why can't you go into specifics about your franchise quarterback's
Because I don't think it needs to be aired out publicly. It's an in-house decision, and that's the way we're going to keep it. And it's in Carson's best interest right now.
There's been questions about, the discovery of the fracture and how that all comes to play. Can you lend any insight into that? Have you guys been giving tests periodically?
What I know is that this thing has evolved over time.
Has it impacted your play calling at all in terms of, rolling him out to the side or anything like that, knowing that he's dealing with sore back? No.
What was your understanding of, you mentioned it happened over time, what was your understanding of the injury during the last few games?
Again, this thing has just evolved. So, we were rolling.
Does that mean it's gotten worse since he appeared in the injury report in mid-October? Has it gotten worse since that point?
Has he felt worse?
Yes.
No.
Is his placement on the injury report in October is this injury related to the one when he first popped up on the injury report in October?
He has a stress injury, evolved over time, and he requires no surgery. I'm not asking or answering any more questions about it. We're playing the Rams in 2 days, if you guys haven't figured this out. So he's listed as questionable, and that's the way it is.
Okay. Will he make a full recovery?
Yes.
Do you know how long that recovery will take?
Don't want to put a timetable on it, but it could be 3 months, possibly.
If you decide before you leave that you're going to go with Nick, is it possible that you won't take Carson on the flight because of his back?
No, he's traveling.
If the injury is there a risk to putting him back out there? You mentioned he's questionable, which would theoretically give him a chance to play. Is there a risk in further injury if you put him out there?
If we put him out there, there has to be 100% that there's no risk of anything further.
So why wasn't that being...
So it's questionable.
But is there a risk of that?
So why was that the standard then throughout the season? If this has evolved over time, then it means he's been playing with an injury over time. So why wasn't that the standard when the injury first came up? Are you following what I'm asking?
Yeah, you're asking when it happened.
No, but for something to evolve,
for something to evolve, it takes time. And when is that window? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
where is that window?
To evolve, it means it didn't happen this past week. Therefore, it's been evolving, like you said. So, from the time when it started evolving, why wasn't this identified then?
Because at the time, probably it wasn't identified as a stress injury or stress fracture, as you said.
Okay. So as you look at that from an organizational perspective, is there concern that you had him out there while this was getting worse?
No, because he was. There were no symptoms. He was 100%. He practiced. He was not on the injury report. For this. So yeah, I had no issue with that.
To the naked eye, it seemed like he was not running as much. And actually, not
Well,
to
I
the naked eye, he was not running.
I answered this earlier in the week about the Dallas Cowboy D-line and how teams know Carson runs. Rush lanes change, rush patterns change, blitzes change to keep a guy like Carson Wentz. And same as I think I even brought up Michael Vick. Teams would blitz and rush Michael Vick differently to keep him in the pocket. So you can't just say, well, he's not running more. Well, put some credit back on the defense and say, hey, they rush a little bit differently too.
Pass production, throwing the ball down the field. He's missing throws that typically he does make. I mean, did you guys see all this and think that maybe?
Well, we saw the missed throws, but we're not linking the two together. We just got to get better at making the throw.
On Monday, you said he's feeling as healthy as he's ever been. Was that your understanding when you got back from Dallas, that there were no issues with his health?
Yeah.
Now, for Carson to be able to play on Sunday night, wouldn't he have to go through the same kinds of tests, possibly out in L.A. for that to happen? And what would the feasibility of that be?
Well, I mean, we're still gathering a lot of information, so the feasibility is probably pretty high.
When did you guys discover the fracture?
When?
Yes.
He had a test done on Tuesday.
And then the results came back on.
And then everything since that point. So everything's evolved up until Tuesday. Until you do a scan, you don't know.
You've mentioned before that ankles connected to the leg. Well, is he compensating for the knee? Does this have anything to do with?
No.
Have they made any link?
No.
So with the test on Tuesday, was that something that happens like regularly, or did he complain about some sort of discomfort?
We do a lot of testing each week on a lot of players. We've done Tim Jernigan. We do all our we've done Sidney Jones. We've done all the guys that have been injured. Avante Maddox. We do them all every week. And Carson's no different. He's been on the injury report from the beginning of the season for other reasons. And so we continue to monitor. And again, that's part of us gathering the information that we need to make sure the guys are ready to go.
You said at the beginning of the season that you're married to him for the next decade. This is his fourth injury of varying levels in 4 years, dating back to his last year in college. So how concerned are you about that going forward?
It's I think it's to ask the question now after 3 years and the injury, situation that's going on. I think you guys can sit here and say that it's probably a red flag. A lot of injuries occur because of the nature of the sport, the violent hits of this sport. Guys know exactly what they are getting into, even at a young age. And Carson's no different. But moving forward, we just got to make sure that we do a better job of protecting him, starting with the offensive line, starting with the backs. He does his part by getting the ball out of his hand. I do my part by maybe incorporating more screens and quick throws to help that. But it's not in any way going to change the aggressiveness of my nature or his moving forward.
This isn't the first injury we've had guys, one thing lead to another. There's been a period of recovery, etc. Is your comfort with the training staff, is that still at a certain level?
It's at a high level because of the communication that we have, myself, Howie, our docs, Jerome, Shireen, everybody involved. We've had a lot of really good conversations, a lot of good protocols put in place for every injured athlete that we've had this season.
As a follow-up to that, Doug,
Listen, that's a doctor question. I'm not getting into those. That's a medical. I'm not getting into that.
I recognize as I asked this that you're not on the medical staff, but
Thank you.
but they're not
for
up
recognizing
here.
that.
No, but they're not up here, and Howie's not up here, so we ask you.
I'm the head football coach.
Exactly.
And
So-
so I get the pleasure of coming up here. That's my job.
Yes.
That's what I have to do.
So as you look at the injuries this season, Carson among them, have you noticed a trend in injuries that have regressed or have gotten worse?
Specifically?
Darren Sproles, Tim Jernigan, Jalen Mills showed up in a walking boot a few weeks into the injury. Sidney Jones has re-injured himself 3 times in games this year. I understand it's a violent sport.
There's a fine line with guys that can return to play that have an injury, and there's a fine line of how far you want to push an athlete to test him to see where he's at physically through his protocol. And we have a protocol. Each athlete has their own, based on injury, has their own protocol, and we have to measure where he is. I don't know, stage 3, stage 4, however many stages there are in that protocol. And so for these athletes, one, for them internally, they want to get back out on the field. Sproles wants to get back out. Jalen wants to get back out. Tim wants to get back out, the guys you mentioned. So we're going to put them through a sort of our own internal tests, right? And so there's a fine line to how much we can push. And then sometimes within that pushing from, whether it's doctors, it could be, the trainer, the player himself, there could be setbacks because we're trying to see where the athlete is. And that happens. That happens with everybody in the National Football League. So that's kind of what's happened. But I don't think that we've had a setback or a step back at all with any of that.
Doug, since you're the only person from the organization that is up here answering questions about the medical staff, one question that's never been answered is why were the top 2 doctors fired after you guys won a Super Bowl?
I'm not even going to comment on that either.
Doug, you've had a back fracture before. You know the nature of back.
Mine was different.
I know it is. Back,
totally
and
different.
that's where the questions go. And this is a stress fracture, which I've seen termed as a trickier form of a back fracture. Is that your understanding? What is your long-term concern when it comes to Wentz?
The information is that it required, number one, no surgery, which is a positive. Mine didn't need surgery either, but mine was completely different. Mine was a transverse process that was broke off with some other damage back there. So 2 different injuries. And the fact that he doesn't need surgery on this, I mean, is the best news that you could possibly have on anybody that has a stress fracture or a stress injury in this case.
But in terms of the long-term outlook, I mean, is there still a level of haziness because of the trickiness that comes with, especially at
No. As long as we
fracture.
take the proper steps to make sure that all our players are 100%, then no.
Why not show them
Okay, thank you.
I'm out.
All right, there we go. So there was Doug Peterson earlier today.
Gosh, it went great.
So Doug shutting down a lot on specifics as far as, they, and again, it kind of goes back to like week 1 in the season when there was that possibility that, at least the way Doug Peterson was framing it, that, Wentz might play, and Doug here kind of, shutting down, or trying to shut down reports that Wentz is not going to play, and all kinds of interesting questions regarding this Carson Wentz situation, even going into there at the end. You just heard 2 team doctors getting fired. Doug, I'm not even going to comment on that. And you could tell Doug just, like he said there, wanted to get out. I'm out, he said at the end of it. So there you have it.
Come on, that's terrible!
Doug Peterson addressing the media earlier today. So that's an interesting situation. We'll have to wait and see if, again, positive that doesn't require surgery, but it's one of those things like like you could see it on the one option play that they tried to run with Carson Wentz, and I don't know, he just didn't have the same zip. And I mean, I like to think next year he'll come back and he'll be a little more fully recovered from this situation, as well as the ACL injury from last year. That's not to say that the ACL isn't fully healed, but just kind of getting confident in your abilities. I don't know if that's maybe been a factor a decent amount this year. I mean, it certainly at times looks like it in a game like what we saw against the Dallas Cowboys, where, again, like, there he is running an option play. I don't know, it just doesn't look as like he has as much fervor as he had previously. But, you know, again, it's this crazy year after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and I guess we shouldn't be too surprised and too wrapped up in it when next year definitely see a little more of maybe Carson Wentz that we saw the year before. All right, so we're going to take another break here. Coming out on the other side, we got top 5 thoughts around the NFL we'll get to in the last week. And then we'll wrap things up right here on the Tyler Werner Show. So everybody stay tuned for more after this.
Attention parents. Is your under 18-year-old daughter being cyberstalked by a man who identifies themselves as a grown adult male?
I want to meet you and fool around. Are you up to meeting tonight, hon? I think I would like to shower with you. We can do it in the shower, too.
If so, you need to contact Chris Hansen and Company to bust these online cyberstalkers.
How are you tonight? Why don't you have a seat there and get comfortable for that? I guess you're going to tell me next that this is the very first time you've done something like this.
Chris Hansen and the Dateline crew will take care of it. Contact us, and we will put an end to the cyber-stalking that your daughter is experiencing.
Well, there's something you got to know. I am Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story on computer predators.
Busted! What defines the perfect ball? It's not just about size when it comes to Brady and Belichick's slow-cooked Italian meatballs.
I've handled dozens of balls over the past week. We prepare our balls over time. The texture of the balls is very easy to identify.
And that slow-cooked texture is one of the qualities that make Brady and Belichick's meatballs stand above the rest. But it's also Brady's unique rubbing process that only he has the authority to perform.
When I pick those footballs out, to me they're perfect. I don't want anyone touching the balls after that. I don't want anyone rubbing them. To me, those balls are perfect.
Once the balls reached an equilibrium, we're down to the rubbing process.
Brady and Belichick's slow-cooked Italian meatballs. When you're looking to make it a pasta night, we're doing a little catering. Like Brady would say, to me, those balls are perfect.
All right, and we're back on this edition of the Tyler Werner Show. You're at Doug Peterson. A little contentious as usual when it comes to Carson Wentz's status for this upcoming matchup against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, as I laid it out, I mean, in some regards, it's a must-win game. I hate to say it's 6-7, that this isn't a must-win game. Because as I laid it out earlier, I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles, they beat the Texans, and they beat the Redskins, which they really should beat the Redskins the final week of the season. If they're able to do that, and finish 8-8, that might be good. That might be good enough in this NFC wildcard picture where the 6th seed is kind of it's mostly between the Vikings right now and the Eagles by virtue of, where the records stand, and given that both teams are not totally dead in the water like the Redskins and the Panthers seem to be. But of course, I also mentioned the Green Bay Packers, who, if they pull off a win against Chicago, which is possible, it's certainly possible, they have a chance to finish 8-7-1. Which, again, could be, if the Vikings finish 7-8-1, that could be Packers. That could be a factor. If the Eagles finish 8-8, so I don't know. I mean, it'd be great if, whether it be Foles out there, whether it be Wentz, if the Eagles could pull off this win against the Rams, but I'm not counting on it. Maybe against the Texans, but I feel like that's still pushing it too. But we'll see. Maybe they finish 8-8, and that might get them in. Which is why I say maybe this isn't a must-win game, even though they kind of I don't know, just by virtue of where the Vikings sit and how the Vikings may finish down the stretch. I don't know. But yes, this music means it's time to go around the NFL. Top 5 thoughts around the league. And I'm going to, since this is the day after Thursday Night Football for this coming week in the NFL, Week 15, I'm counting it eligible because I don't want to gloss over what happened on Thursday Night Football. But nevertheless, let's say in the last week, top 5 thoughts in the last week, game results that stood out to me right here on the Tyler Werner Show, counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thought number 5, the Miami Dolphins edge out the New England Patriots 34-33 for those who saw it on a desperation lateral play at the end of the game to upset the New England Patriots. This is key for the Dolphins in particular because that last wild card spot in the AFC really looks like it's up for grabs between several teams right now who are sitting at a 7-6 record, and the Miami Dolphins are one of those teams. Following the game, I mean, you got to think Bill Belichick was not real happy with how that game turned out.
This is the end of this subject for me for a long time.
So the Miami Dolphins winning that game down in Miami, typically a game that the Patriots struggle in the regular season, that road game down in Miami. But nevertheless, Patriots sit at 9-4. They may not get home field advantage this year by the looks of it. We'll see if they get a first-round bye. Might depend on what the Texans do, but Patriots now at 9-4. Number 4 thought around the NFL in the last week: the Indianapolis Colts defeat the Houston Texans in Houston 24-21. That ends their 9-game winning streak that the Texans had going. Big win for the Colts, bounce back after a tough loss the week before. And again, this is a key win for the Colts in terms of their wild card race here. Another 7-6 team, maybe hoping to get into the final wild card spot in the AFC. Number 3 thought: this past week in the NFL, the Seattle Seahawks, they similarly lock up that 5th seed in the NFC with their 21-7 win over the Minnesota Vikings. Again, that was a game that was going to tell a lot in the wild card picture. And that puts the Vikings at a 6-6-1 record. Well, the Seahawks now sit comfortably at 8-5 in that 5th seed in the NFC. And will likely go on the road to take on the Dallas Cowboys depending how things play out here record-wise down the stretch. But that's what it's looking like. Number 2 thought in the last week, the Chicago Bears defeating the Los Angeles Rams 15-6. Big win for the Chicago Bears. They moved to 9-4 after the Bears had lost the week before, disappointingly, to the New York Giants. This one they bounce back and get the win, 15-6. Rams still on a strong 11-2, and we'll see what happens against the Eagles this week. Might be a 12-2 following this game. Still vying for, tied at 11-2 with the New Orleans Saints for home field advantage in the NFC. But of course, the Saints did previously beat the Rams, so the Saints right now have the edge there. Number 1 thought around the NFL in the last week. Again, given this is the day after a huge Thursday night football game, even though it is technically a Week 15 game and not a Week 14 like the other ones, the Los Angeles Chargers edge out the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City last night on Thursday Night Football, 29-28. Both teams are now 11-3. This was huge because previously in the season, the Chiefs did defeat the Chargers in Los Angeles. Now the Chargers getting the win back in Kansas City. And with both teams at 11-3, I'd have to, don't have off the top of my head, know who would have the edge in the tiebreak division records, common opponents, yada yada. But nevertheless, that result may prove very vital in who ends up getting home field advantage in the AFC. Chances are it's going to be one of those teams. Chargers 11-3, having quite a solid season, and it was a huge win for the Chargers last night on Thursday Night Football. Coming down the stretch here as the playoff race is taking full form in both conferences. And yeah, chances are it's going to be either the Chiefs or the Chargers with home field advantage this year. I'm trying to think the last time the Philadelphia Eagles had home field advantage with Andy Reid. That is a good question, isn't it? It might have been off the top of my head, if I try to think here, it might have been that year they went to the Super Bowl. I can't think if they went. I know they had maybe another 11-5 year a couple seasons later. I don't believe. Maybe they. I don't think they had home field advantage the year that the Cardinals ended up going. If I'm not mistaken, the Eagles kind of snuck in at, I think, 9-6-1 that season, if I'm not mistaken, and ended up hosting the Cardinals, who were 9-7 that year. But I don't think they had home field advantage that year. I don't know. This might be the first opportunity, or first time that the Chiefs first time that Andy Reid, that his team will have home field advantage in the playoffs since the 2004 season. I don't know.
Time's yours.
Good question. All right. So that's pretty much going to wrap things up on the Tyler Werner Show here again. The Eagles, they have their work cut out for them, as they got to take on the Los Angeles Rams. Is Carson Wentz going to play? We'll have to wait and see. I might go with Ian Rappaport here and just kind of, I don't know. The Eagles could still get in the playoffs, and that would be more incentive to keep Wentz in there. But I'm just thinking, maybe given where the season is at anyhow, and that maybe they don't want to, if Doug Peterson's going to say he'll play if there's 100%, confidence that he isn't risking further injury. Then, well, I don't know if there will be 100% confidence in that, or if there is. So I would just go out on a limb and say, well, maybe Foles gets the start. But I don't know. I could be wrong. We'll have to wait and see. Either way, it's going to be a very tough game for the Philadelphia Eagles out there in Los Angeles, and we'll see what they can do. Fingers crossed, hope they can pull off a win, and if they do, then hey, then that 8-8 finish is, very much realistic, even if they lose to the Texans, because then they should win that last game of the year against the Redskins. And that may be good enough to get that final wild card spot in the NFC. But it's not a guarantee. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And we'll discuss next time on the Tyler Werner Show. Everybody stay tuned for that next time. Go Eagles. Hope they can pull it off. And we'll discuss next time on the Tyler Werner Show. Everybody have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you then.
Let's make some noise. Come on.